Okay, Rob Bell, thanks very much for joining Perspectives. I'm very excited to have you on.
Hey, Reese, how you going? Good to be
Yeah,
here. Thank you.
good. Right, so normally like to start with a bit of an introduction, but that's getting the guests themselves to tell us a bit about themselves. So for anyone who isn't familiar with Rob Bell, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Rob Bell, as you said. I'm an engineering and history TV presenter. So I've got my background is in engineering. My education and degrees in engineering, mechanical engineering, and I moved into television about 14 years ago. And through that, I get to explore loads of different engineering stories, engineering history stories, and more recently, some pure history as well, which I never knew I loved as much as I do, because at GCSE, I did not enjoy history, but now I really, really do. So that's my profession. But then in my spare time, I love being active. I love being physical. I love being outside. I love challenging myself to see what I can do. And more often than not, I'll be doing that with at least one, if not a group of friends, because there's a huge amount of enjoyment in that. And even more recently, I've become a father for the first time as well.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks very much.
That poses challenges unique to the ones you've already faced, I'd imagine.
It does. It does. But that's all part of the juggling act. And I enjoy that, Reese. I enjoy that.
I've spoken to a few people, and some people really love it. Other people, you kind of come in, they're like, "Oh, I don't have kids. I don't have kids." They love it really, but they're like, "I'm just so tired."
It's a challenge, man. And I like to be busy. I like to have loads of things going on. I like to be seeing people doing stuff with people all the time, and it just forces you to reprioritize a lot of stuff. And my lovely little girl is a priority for me. So everything else has to shift around that.
Massively. So, an engineer by trade, then, where do you think that sort of love for engineering came from? Do you always want to go into it? Is it something that just was a natural occurrence for you?
I need to be. So I got picked up on this once. I think I said I was an engineer by. Did I say by profession or by trade? I got picked up. I'm an engineer by education.
By degree.
By degree.
So,
That's basically it. Sorry. So what was your question, Reece? I got distracted by that.
So yeah, it was more you're an engineer by education. What sort of led you to get into engineering?
Right. So to be perfectly honest with you, I throughout my secondary school education, I just kind of followed what I enjoyed doing, what I felt I should be doing, without any real goal or aim that was driving that. And that continued on through into university. I ended up studying mechanical engineering at the University of Bath, probably more than anything else because my mate from the year above did that. And I was into similar things to him. I was kind of good at maths and enjoyed maths and physics rather than English and history, those subjects. And more technical subjects I'd always enjoyed and had been better at. So I just kind of pursued that and continued doing it without any real goal until I graduated and then didn't know what I wanted to do at all. But throughout my degree, there was a massive enjoyment in learning what I did. It was hard, right? I found it really, really difficult. Being an engineer can be, I feel like studying engineering pushed me to the limits of my academic capacity, shall we say. Like the amount of maths involved, I was not expecting, probably because I didn't read the prospectus. But it was a real challenge for me, but I really enjoyed that challenge, and I really enjoyed the subject matter, not just the technical stuff. It's all of the kind of project management and, let's call it, real logical stuff, right? If you're looking at it from an engineer's perspective, it's about logic a lot of the time, weighing up your options and taking the option that way comes out best weighted. That approach to life was brilliant to be learning and to be immersed in with all of my engineering buddies as well. And that's something that I've continued to enjoy. But now, being a TV presenter for the last decade or so and going out and seeing real engineers on the ground doing what they do, I've rediscovered this love, and the overused word, but I will use it, this passion that I have for it. I just get so much enjoyment. I'll be chatting to engineers sometimes for a TV program, and this is off camera before or after we've actually done the filming. And I've got like the hairs on my arms standing on end because I'm just loving what I'm learning so much and what brilliant people are doing more often than not to make the world a better place. Engineering is bloody brilliant.
Yeah, massively. I mean, I love engineering because there's so many, and I'd love to get your opinion on this because I love anything mechanical. I studied engineering as well, and it's one of the reasons why I love classic cars, why I love planes, why I love watches, mechanical watches. I just have such a fascination with, if I poke something, I want it to move, and if it doesn't move, then I'm like, well, something's wrong here. Whereas I think now we're in such a digital age, everything's become a lot more digital, everything's become a lot more sleek. When you poke something, it doesn't move. It's very all in the ether. It's what's that McConaughey thing? It's a wazzy, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust thing. But I love buttons, and I would love to get your opinion on this, but I feel like now we're in such an age of consumerism where things are not designed to last decades, and everything's, there's no buttons anymore. Everything's touchscreen. And, you look at the design language in cars, for example, EV argument aside, because I know everyone's very opinionated on the whole rise of EVs and things like that. But I just love having a button. When I'm driving along, I know where everything is. I know where the temperature is. I know where the direction is. I know, how much the fan's on. Whereas now there's, the design language of pretty much every modern car you get into, there's a screen, there's a digital dashboard, and you might have a gear lever, and you might have like a, automatic brake. And I'm just like, there's just nothing to it. And it makes me a little bit sad. And I feel like it's a little bit boring, but it's very much function over form rather than, making stuff beautiful. And if you look back to, I know you did a series on, you've got the book behind you actually, Brunel, look at like the, SS Great Britain, you've got the Clifton Suspension Bridge, you look at some of the old stuff as well. So how train stations were designed, the architecture used to be very beautiful, and now we're in these kind of very sleek, very modern, and I feel like it's just it's a bit soulless now. I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
No, I feel like we're probably very much on the same page with this, Reese. When you're talking about when you push a button, you want to feel it do something. You want some kind of positive mechanical feedback to let you know that yes, what I've demanded there has registered. And I don't know what you're like, but let's say driving in an older car, let's take my first car, Golf Mark II. Everything was very, very mechanical on there. Part of the beauty of it meant that someone like me, who was I'm not a mechanic expert on cars, but I understand mechanics. So give me enough time, I'll figure it out what's happening and maybe what's not happening and why that is. Something's blocked somewhere. I love when I push a button in a car in my Golf Mark II. I really enjoyed the process of following what that button, the chain of events that button then sets off, and that's mechanical events in that car. What you've got now is the more touch screen, and I'm not interested, to be perfectly honest. I'm not interested what happens when I do that because it's switches and software doing its thing. Great. And, part of me goes, you should be interested in this, Rob, because this is the future. This is where everything's going. So if you want a future, mate, you need to kind of get over yourself and understand how this stuff works and be interested in it. The truth is, I'm not interested in it. So, and I can't force myself to be interested in stuff. I'd learn that about myself. So, I'm very much in the world of mechanical, and it is a fascination. I think, is it in America or England? We call it Rube Goldberg machines. No, I think that's the American. What's the English version of it? Like Wallace and Gromit, you press the button and see how you get out of bed in the morning. It's a series of,
right,
like a pointless machine. What's the name for it? Hang on, I'm going to let this up, Reece. Give me 2 seconds.
I'm not sure.
Rube Goldberg in UK. It's called... There we go. Heath Robinson, thank you. A Heath Robinson contraption, that's the word I was looking for, where it's almost a pointless machine, but it's so visual and it's so mechanical that one thing that you've tripped leads to another, thing happening which falls over and,
Oh,
pulls this
yeah,
string,
yeah.
and then the pulley meant that. I love all of that. I love all of that. For me, I want more of that in my life, but that's not the way the world is going. So yes, in answer to your question, I miss it. I wish there was more of it, and then I sometimes feel like I've been born in the wrong age, and maybe take me back a few decades, and then I'd have been in my absolute element.
Bring me a monocle and I'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly. The pocket watch.
But I do think credit where it's due as well. You do have some amazing bits of engineering now. We have, you just have to look as far as, let's take, classic example, SpaceX. They've got their self-landing rocket. It's like, never in my lifetime would I have ever seen anything like that. And it is just, every time I see it, it still blows me away. You've got the fan car. You've got, Gord Murray Automotive, the T50. I had the pleasure of seeing one of those this year actually, and went to one of the concourse events. And just everything is just engineered to precision.
Yeah.
Same with the the Aston Martin Valkyrie as well. Have you ever seen one of those in the flesh?
No, I have not.
Oh, it looks impressive, but then you go and see it, and it's just so radical. It's very, very, very impressive.
There's a fine line there, I think, Reece, between what we described earlier as something feeling quite clinical to a real enjoyment of that precision. Right. So yeah, but I've waxed lyrical there about, mechanical and decades and eras gone by. But yes, I'm it's impossible not to be impressed by some of the slick engineering that we're surrounded by. So I don't dismiss it at all. It just doesn't engender a real love for me in the products or the mechanics itself, but an impression and an admiration of what engineers are achieving. That's not diluted at all. It's probably an element of awe, actually, because it's so far from my own capabilities. I love to understand it, but I think, God, I could never be on the forefront coming up with those ideas and fulfilling that kind of precision and operation that these projects are achieving.
Yeah, massively. I mean, it's been the same throughout generations, really, hasn't it? You've always had that kind of those outliers who have created stuff where everyone's like, no, it's not going to work, and you're like, oh, it does work. And now we're kind of we're running the world on electricity, and the light bulb's a common thing, and yeah, it is very cool. But do you think
it takes us back to the term Luddites?
Yeah. Do you think engineering is going to sort of continue in this way, or do you think certain trends have been quite cyclical with other facets of life? Do you think that engineering might go in that way, like with the design language? Do you think we'll see more? Do you think we'll see more buttons again?
I think there's room for both. Maybe not on mass scale. Maybe mass scale has moved to digital in the digital direction, and for many reasons, I totally understand that. But you mentioned it recently as well. I've got some friends who, not that long ago, within the last decade, set up their own watch company, and it's mechanical watches, and it is an enjoyment of slower living, the enjoyment of actually winding up your watch, the enjoyment of they tend to have a glass back piece on the back of the watches so that you can see all of the cogs and all of the mechanics in action. I don't think the joy of that will ever disappear. So I think there's definitely room for both, but I feel that maybe the slower living mechanical side of things will become slightly more niche. But niche in today's world could be 1 billion people rather than 7 or 8.
Yeah, that's
7 or 8 billion.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. No, I completely agree, and I love the whole. Let's say watches are probably one of my biggest passions, and I've harped on about it in this podcast many times.
Have you really? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, some of my guests have been auctioneers, work for Phillips, so he was involved in the sale of the Paul Newman Daytona. So went for record breaking 17 million. It went for back in 2017.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, but yeah, it's cool. Okay, so looking at your transition then into broadcasting, what do you think to use a terrible pun here, or what do you think the catalyst for that was? What do you think the transition sort of state was?
Biggest catalyst for me changing career. So at the time I was working as a project manager. So I changed career when I was 32, 33, and I was working as a business development and project manager for a government funded environmental agency called the Energy Saving Trust. So I was kind of developing and running government programs to help homeowners save energy, save money. And I still have a real passion for sustainability and for net zero and green economy. But at the time, my role wasn't that exciting. And there's a lot of risk adversity within the public sector, and it takes a lot of time for nothing to happen, was my experience. And I got a bit frustrated with that, having worked there for 8 years. And I just started thinking, it's got to be more to earning a living than turning up to an office and just doing something that you've ended up in every day, which is kind of where I was. I mean, I sought out a job within the environmental sector, but, I didn't seek out a project management job. So I ended up, the role that I was doing, I just ended up in it, and I didn't love that. So that was my main catalyst. But going back to what I said earlier, I still didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do. So I took out a credit card at the time and engaged the services of a career counsellor. And so over a number of weeks, and it's not rocket science, right? It all comes from within your own head, but you just break it down, and having somebody there to kind of hold your hand and make sure that you actually do it, and go through some exercises and determine what is it you love doing, what is it you do if money wasn't an object, what are you most proud of? Or there's questions like this, and you start listing it out, and then you start to, there's some shapes, some similarities that start, and some themes that start coming through, and so you seek through that. And at the time I was also I'd done hospital radio within London, voluntary radio. I worked on another volunteer radio station in London. I did student radio at university. I really enjoyed making silly videos for YouTube and entering video competitions with my friends in my spare time. So all of those things, the career counselling, what was coming out of that, plus what I was actually doing in my spare time, started to come together. And it's like, do you know what? Yeah, I've kind of known this for a while, but now I've got it down on paper. I've formalized it in a way, which for me is important. I think broadcasting is where I want to be. And so that was it. That was the transition. And then I quit my job. And I remember the first day in my new role as a broadcaster or a wannabe broadcaster, sitting at home going like, right, what the F do I do now?
Yeah. What have I done?
What have I done? Yeah. What have I done?
You mentioned the buzzword earlier, and I'm going to touch on this, the idea of passion and finding passion in what you do. And I do agree that it does get thrown around like a bit of a hot potato. But I think it's been discussed quite a lot, really. And this idea of finding, should you do a career because you're good at it, or should you actually do something because you're passionate about it? And I think there's a bit of a trade-off between doing something you can be good at. Always find that you could, potentially reach a bit of a ceiling with that. Whereas doing something you're passionate about, you may start off a little bit lower, but then I think the returns will be more exponential in terms of what you can do. Because you go past the point of, actually, I'm very good at it, but you really want to do it as well. So I think you're naturally more predisposed to push the boundaries a bit more and learn and go that extra mile, so to speak.
Yeah.
Do you think, it sounds like it was a conscious decision for you because you had that career coach, you went through the motions. Do you think that passion is something you really should pursue, or do you think it's something that you kind of figure out as you go along?
I think everyone's different in that sense, and you have to decide what motivates you the most. Because the other factor within that, Reece, I think was probably a third circle within this Venn diagram is money, right? And how important is money to you? Because that's the answer to that is different for everybody, and the answer to how, what's the sense of achievement you get from doing something that you're really good at, and how much do you want to be challenged through your passion to get better, but know that there might be a journey there. Those three things come together, hopefully, to form your career. personally, I can say I think it's really, really important I get a lot out of improving something that I want to spend my time getting better at, where I get a real enjoyment from the activity itself. Kind of doing something you're good at. I mean, I probably figured I was all right at presenting and broadcasting, but there's no there's no exam to take. There's no mark that you get. I just enjoyed doing it. So yeah, for me, pursuing something that I really, really enjoyed, pursuing that passion, was at the forefront of driving the decisions to start that career. It's probably not until much more recently. So for the first probably 8, 9, 10 years, I just followed that. I really enjoyed doing this. It's only more recently where I've started to appreciate the journey of development that you go on. Because when I first started out, if I look back, the first job I did as a TV presenter, I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. No clue. I'd had no training. I'd never been in front of a camera with a number of people behind it before, with a professional camera operator and a director and a producer. I didn't even know what those roles were. So I just did as best. I did as good a job as I could at the time. So now looking back, I can see that there is a development curve that I've gone on in my presenting. Although you could then possibly argue, and this is getting a little bit more into the profession itself, you could possibly argue that being aware of your development curve and being aware of your role as a presenter can be detrimental, because the best presenters, I feel, are the ones who are most natural in their delivery and probably aren't thinking about, I'm a presenter, I'm in presenter mode. They're just doing what they do. And they'd probably be the same whether they're on camera or off camera, or not too different a version between anyway.
It's interesting you say that, because there's this idea of, have you heard of the Peter Principle?
Yes, indeed. We did an episode on it on a podcast.
Yeah, we shout out to Sketchplanations as well. That's a really cool entity. We'll get onto that a little bit later, but this idea of what was I talking about? The
Peter Principle.
Oh yeah. So there was a great sort of, someone put it in a great sort of, he phrased it really well. It was a guy called Jamie Alderton, and he was very direct with it, but he was basically like, everyone's fucking winging it. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to put it. But the more you talk to people, the more you see what people are doing. There is a lot of that. You see people, they're just doing what they think is right. It's not necessarily a conscious decision. So a lot of the things we, fear and the stories we tell ourselves, people aren't thinking about us. They're thinking about themselves, and they're just trying to do the best. So you take your example there. They're really natural in what they're presenting. They're not switching on and off. They're probably like thinking, they could be easily thinking, oh shit, like I need to make sure I'm, putting this persona on, or like I'm appearing great in my job. So some people, it may seem unconscious, but it is conscious. And then you get this idea of the Peter Principle as well, where you kind of get these different levels of people in a hierarchy or an organization, and they're competent enough up to a point where they're no longer kind of competent, and then they get stuck at that position. So you end up with the people that, and this is why you end up with people in, different companies, and you're like, how the hell have they got up to that position? Because they are terrible at their job, and it's at all levels. But it's quite reassuring to that those two things, everyone's winging it, and the Peter Principle, two great things I rely on quite a lot to go, actually, do you know what? I'm not doing so badly. I'm probably doing better than what they're doing, even though, it doesn't seem like it. So it's quite a cool little principle.
And what I find, I totally agree with you, Reece. Yeah, both those things are really, really helpful to remind yourself in a number of situations in life, right? But particularly in the professional situation. If, for example, you're giving a presentation, it's a really important presentation to the board or something, you need to remember those two things you just said. If, I don't know, you might feel intimidated because you're going into a new team or into a new job, whatever, just remember those two things you talked about as well. And it does just go, oh, you know what? The other thing I remind myself, which is less of a professional thing, but it does kind of help ground you, is that everyone takes a shit in the morning. It's we're all just people trying to do the best we can, and it helps me, as I say, just stay grounded and I can still get intimidated, definitely, but it probably takes the shine off that a little bit, which is very helpful.
Massively. It's that imposter syndrome, isn't it? And since I've learned that, I go into, if it's a new role, if it's a new challenge, I'm like, well, as long as I can just, act like I can do it, and you just, kind of, you end up sort of morphing into that role anyway. So it's imposter syndrome, I think, it's very much an idea we create in our own heads. Whereas, I mean, there are people that aren't, they struggle at their jobs, but I think a lot of skills can be taught. There are things that are very innate for people, but yeah, I think imposter syndrome is one of those ones which holds a lot of people back when it doesn't really need to.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I'd say there is probably a flip side to that. If you get a number of people within a team who are all quite dismissive of, let's say, the Peter Principle and their own limits of capability, and they're all just winging it and bigging themselves up more than they actually are, if that's working towards, let's say, an engineering project,
not
you
great.
probably do. You do need some competence in there at some point. I've taken that to the extreme, but it's quite a fun thought exercise.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's interesting with your role as well, because I've heard it said that one of the biggest fears for humans, second to, death comes second, but the first one is the fear of public humiliation. And I think being a broadcaster, you are putting yourself in that position where everyone is looking at you. You are the sole reason why people are watching. Well, not sole reason, but you are that that bridge between the information between the consumer and the engineers. Have you ever thought about that? I don't want to ruin your career now if I think of that, but
yeah, no, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me because there's similar to what we were talking about earlier with Pete's Principle and such. Sometimes I'll say to myself, do you know what? People aren't no one's sitting there on the edge of their seat listening to every single word that you say. I'll caveat that with, if it's an engineering documentary and you get something slightly wrong from a technical perspective, there are some people who are on the edge of their seat listening to every word you say, and they will tell you what you've got wrong. And that's good, and I welcome that. I absolutely welcome that. But in terms of humiliating myself, I mean, what I do it typically isn't live. I do some live TV, but typically it isn't live. And as a team, with you and your directors and producers and editors and execs, whatever, no one wants to make a bad program. Everyone wants to make as good a program as possible. But you're right. You are, you do put yourself out there, and that's a decision that you make. It's not. I don't think you can say, it's unfair. I'm getting loads of stick because I got something wrong, or I looked like a tit when I did that on telly. That's the decision you make. You have to be conscious. You have to take that on the chin, which I'm quite happy to do, as well as with Twitter is dying a bit of a death. But I'd say if you're a TV presenter, then you can definitely get some of the sharper end of what was happening on Twitter, and you can let that get to you, and you can take notice of it, or you can just shrug it off and have a bit of a laugh, which is what I tend to do. Occasionally, if I've had a lot of my programs, I did loads for Channel 5, and they typically went out on Friday evenings. So if you're at home on Friday evening, you think, maybe people maybe having a drink, enjoying a glass of wine or a bottle of beer or whatever, watching this. And when they went out, that was normally the first time I'd seen them in all their glory as well, completely finished. So I've most of the stuff I've done, I would sit and watch for the first time as well. And if I had a beer and I'd seen some comments on Twitter, after a beer or two, I might just have a little dig back just for a bit of fun. But typically, I just ignore it, and I don't let it get to me at all. That said, the level of scrutiny that I'm under with my programs about engineering, documentaries on engineering history, I totally appreciate. I don't get half the volume. I don't get a fraction of the volume that some of the really well watched stuff gets on TV. So I understand how that, if you were getting just a volley of abuse through social media, I can definitely see how that could have an impact. But yeah, fortunately, I'm not in that realm. But at the same time, and to answer your question, it's a conscious decision, and you have to be okay with it. Yeah, you have to be okay with it.
yeah, I suppose it's probably the wrong profession if you're a bit shy of scrutiny and being looked at.
Possibly. But I mean, there's plenty of roles to enjoy not on camera within
Yeah.
television as well,
Yeah,
as you well know.
excellent. So, just talking about your shows, then you've got wealth of experience from massive structures, engineering structures, bridges, nuclear submarines, wartime technologies. And in your most recent one, you've been looking at. You've popped up on my LinkedIn feed actually a few times with your with the stuff you've been doing with EDF, looking around the power station, nuclear power station. I'd like to ask: are there any real? You've had a lot of experience with a lot of these different technologies. Is there anything that's really stood out to you in terms of when you did it? It really blew your mind.
Yes, and it's probably not the answer that in answering this, anyone listening, you go, hang on, that's not answering that question. That didn't blow your mind. Bridges, right? And you look at a bridge, you go, that's not mind-blowing technology, mate. That's structural engineering that's been going on for millennia. So what do you mean bridges? I was blown away by how much I loved making programs and learning all the nuances about bridges. So I never did civil engineering. Within my mechanical engineering degree, I don't think we ever looked at bridges. We didn't really look that much. No, we didn't. We didn't do much civil engineering at all. I didn't even know what a civil engineer was when I was doing my degree, unbelievably.
A very personable engineer.
What, a civil engineer? Yeah, very good, very, very good.
Right.
No, it's good. But yeah, film and bridges, there's the engineering side of it, which there's so many things. There's so many beautiful little aspects that get engineered into a bridge that, your average punter who uses that bridge won't appreciate. And, there's no reason why they should. They've never been told about it, which is partly the joy of making these programs. Because you can bring fascination. Well, hopefully you can, muster some fascination in the everyday objects around us that we all use. But it's also what bridges do for societies and communities as well that just kind of blew me away. But there was a particular moment. I think it's in the world's greatest bridges. We went to the world's tallest bridge. It's called the Millau Viaduct. It's in kind of south of France, or 2/3 of the way down, and it's in this beautiful green valley. And it's this slick cable stay bridge that crosses that valley, and it's a French autoroute bridge. And it's beautifully designed by Lord Norman Foster, or architecture behind it, and the French bridge engineer was a chap called Michel Verlogeux, very experienced bridge designer. And we got to go all over the bridge, and we climbed up pylon 2, which was the tallest of the, I'm going to say 9 pylons that cross the valley. And I got to poke my head out the top and look down on the bridge as it curved its way across this beautiful green valley. And I had a real moment of, it brought a little tear to my eye. In fact, a director friend was watching when it went out, and he texted me and said, have I just seen you cry on top of a bridge? And I kind of did. I was so overwhelmed by what I saw beneath me, and this beautiful structure that had been designed and engineered by people, by humans, and that fit in so beautifully with the surroundings, and that was so functional for the local communities. Basically, building this bridge meant that traffic didn't have to go through this small town down in the valley, which was an absolute nightmare in the summer months when everyone's on their holiday down to south of France. And I'd learned a lot about what had gone into designing this bridge and what was so special about it as well. And yeah, I was blown away by it. So yeah, bridges, Reese.
Yeah.
And to this day, I am fascinated by bridges. And whenever I see one or cross one or come across a new bridge, I will, no matter what the situation, I will just spend even a minute considering that bridge at a level that's slightly more than, oh, it's a bridge.
It's a bridge.
What kind of bridge is it? How old is it? What materials are used? Okay, great. I can move on now.
Excellent. We learned a little bit about it in vibrational. We did some vibrational dynamics and the effect of putting dampers and making sure the right damping.
Yep.
So a good example, I think, is the Millennium Bridge as well, as to what happens when you get it slightly wrong. So
Absolutely.
when that first opened, it was they had to shut it fairly quickly because they were getting these. And there's a great video on YouTube of something slightly different, but it was you start seeing sort of the oscillations of when people are walking over it. This bridge is moving all over the place, and so they had to shut it and put some more damping in. And the one I really like to show people to, direct people to, is the Tacoma Narrows. That was, that is a classic video of just when you get it slightly wrong, or when you don't consider the engineering, how badly wrong it can go. And for anyone who's not seen it, it's very much a video I'd recommend going to have a look at. And I think it was to do with the wind, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
Essentially, I don't know if people have seen when you get like opera singers who, can break a glass with their voice when they can sing at that certain pitch. So it's the same sort of principle, but applied to bridges, where the wind was blowing at the same frequency as the natural frequency of the bridge. And so you were getting this like a massive oscillation between either side to side. And this bridge was just twisting like nothing you've ever seen. There were cars flying around. And eventually, obviously, it broke down and crumbled. But like, for anyone who hasn't seen it, that is just a great example of just how much you could appreciate the engineering with the massive bridges that you get now. Even like you got the small bridges like Clifton, you got the ones that go from over to Wales, and that's why they tend to sort of shut them when there's really high winds and things like that, isn't it? So.
Absolutely. So one of the most amazing things about the Tacoma Narrows Bridge is the fact that we have this footage, because I'm trying to remember what decade it was. I'm going to say like 50s. It's the bridge over in America. I think it's 50s, but we've got footage, and as you described, Reece,
I think it was earlier. I think it might
was it earlier. Yeah,
yeah.
Okay.
I think it was early 1900s. I think there was like Ford. Oh, I love it. Let's have a look.
Let's look it up. I should know this.
1940 film.
Okay. So if
Galloping
you think back,
Gertie, they called it.
That was its nickname. Yeah, the Galloping Gertie. So off the bat, so we touched on both the Millennium Bridge in the documentary I did on the Mio Viaduct, because that was designed by Lord Norman Foster as well, the Millennium Bridge that wobbled. And I interviewed him about that, and he was very humble about it and saying how embarrassing it was. But yeah, what I love is how now when I go across that, I love pointing this out. I'm such a bore. If I'm with anyone, I will point out the dampeners along the bridge that have been retrospectively fitted. But equally, when I did an episode on the Humber Bridge up in the northeast of England, I learned about how the shape of the deck was a result of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, because the shape of the Humber Bridge is now like an aerofoil, like on an aeroplane wing, which means that when the wind blows across it, instead of the deck getting blown about and oscillating around by the wind and going into what we had at Tacoma Narrows, which was called flutter, it almost, the stronger the wind, the more resilient the bridge is, because the aerofoil, it drives the bridge deck down and puts more tension in all of the cables and the hangers. So the stronger the wind, because Tacoma Narrows, the design of that bridge deck was amended, and now engineers create bridges that the stronger the wind, the more stable they become. Just brilliant. This is what I mean about bridges, and it's all so visual, right? It's there in front of you. You can see it. It's amazing.
Yeah. It reminds me of there was a story about in World War II when there were bombers coming back from the front line, and there was loads of bombers being shot down, and they were coming back, and the engineers were looking at where they need to reinforce these aircraft with. So they were coming back, they were riddled with bullet holes, and they were looking at where we put the armor to make sure that we're getting more back. And they were saying, oh, well, all the bullet holes, we'll make sure we put armor there. And I can't remember who it was, but there was some aircraftman, whoever it was at the time, I forget his name, but they came over and they were like, well, actually, we shouldn't be worrying about the places that there are bullet holes, because these are the aircraft that are actually coming back. Yeah. It's the ones that are being shot down. It's the bits where, there's no bullet holes is the bits where we need to kind of reinforce it. So as a result, they actually brought back more bombers from the front line, because it took someone to kind of, reverse logic and learn from what had actually happened. And I think it's great that we're still applying what we've learned from the Tacoma Narrows to modern day bridges, to go, actually, we've learned that how not to do it. This is how we should do it.
And you could argue that's what engineering is all about, isn't it? You test, you learn, you redesign. sadly, some engineering disasters have occurred, but when they've occurred, there are always lessons that come out of that. To the point now where like the aviation industry is, one of the safest industries there is, and it's, if there is a learning to be taken from an aircraft disaster, that learning is not just kept within the aircraft manufacturer itself. It's shared across airlines, across airline manufacturers, across aviation authorities around the world.
Yeah, that's good. That's what everyone says. I'm really scared of flying. You're like, it's all right. It's the safest way to travel. You talked earlier about your love for the outdoors and adventure as well, and there's obviously it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention your unbelievable challenge of your 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents. Yeah. I've had some pretty phenomenal guests on. They've done, I've got 36 marathons, 36 days was one of them. She's done Kilimanjaro. There's another guest I had on who's just done Manaslu in Nepal, climbed that mountain. So with each guest I get on, I'm going to have to stop getting these guests on because I've started to feel very lazy in what I'm doing. So, but I wanted to ask you about the challenge. Really, what was the reason behind the challenge?
The reason behind that challenge was it was January. And so I did that 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. I did it with a group of 5 mates. And it was January, quiet time after the rush and the fun of Christmas and New Year, and then everything settles down. And one of the guys was reading Ranulph Fiennes' autobiography, and he read it in there. He thought, it's January. We need a challenge here. We need to set ourselves a challenge. So he brought this up in the pub when we met like a week or so later. And at that point, whenever you decide to do this, it's always going to be months away, if not, years. So it's very easy to say, yeah, that sounds amazing. Let's do that. Yeah. But we did. And then slowly things started happening to the point where every Friday morning, 2 of the lads lived in Singapore and the rest of us here in the UK. So early Friday mornings was when we'd all check in and do video conference calls to update everyone on everyone's actions and what was happening with logistics, what was happening with route planning, what was happening with the website, blah, 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 whatever it might be, with charity and fundraising. And slowly but surely we pulled it all together, and it became it became about more than just the running. It became about this shared project that we all really, really cared about and that we're all really committed to. And that if we didn't pull our weight, then we'd be letting down the project, we'd be letting down our friends. So, I was doing the training, but there was that kind of project side to it as well, and that shared experience amongst friends that became so important. And then the training was fine. I've at the time I was trying to run faster and faster marathons. So my training was all about some speed work and track work, and really trying to be able to up my speed over a long distance. That had to stop. That was one big difference that I did find quite frustrating. And you'd have to go out and run similar or longer distances to what I was doing for my fast marathon training, but just at a slower speed, which meant that it took even longer. And I don't love running. I find it quite dull unless I'm with somebody. Again, it's all of these things come back to shared experience. If I'm running with someone, great, we're having a great chat and I'm really, really enjoying it. And even if it gets really, really hard, I enjoy sharing that hardship with someone. But going out, I couldn't do all my training runs with friends. So yeah, having to drag yourself out, it was tough. It was tough, but yeah, a hell of a thing to have done. I can't quite believe it now. But at the time and during the week that we did it, it was just a question of right, what's next? You're running a marathon, right? What's next? We've got to get to the airport, right? What's next? We've got to make sure we get on that plane, right? What's next? Right? We've got to go out and run another marathon. Or you need to eat. And it was just a series of things that needed to be done, that was on repeat 7 times over, really.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, congratulations. That's quite an achievement. I was reading that you found the last one the hardest because you said you almost kind of like switched off because you're like, oh, I'm here now. I'm only got one more to do.
Yeah, that is exactly what happened, and that's part of it. That's one thing I really love about endurance and pushing oneself in a physical way is the interaction between body and mind. And your mind is, from my experience, and there's lots of research on it as well, how much in control your mind can be over your body and what you're experiencing through what you feel and any pain in your body. But yeah, for me, our last one was in Sydney in Australia, and it had been quite a week up to that point, running and flying, and we just made our flight to get to oh no, that was fine. No, we just made our flight to Singapore for the one before. Getting to Australia was fine, and so we kind of done it, and it felt like, great, we're here. I just need to run one more marathon now. I've been doing it all week. You should be fine. It was really hot. It was about 34 degrees in Sydney. It was January time. I wasn't worried about that. It was, but after about 10 kilometers out of the 42, I realized this is a slog, and I'm hating every second of this. I don't know if I can do this, because my mind had switched off. I'd stopped focusing. I'd already crossed the finish line in my mind, which meant that my body suddenly had a lot of things to say that it wasn't happy about. But up to that point, I feel like my mind had probably switched off a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You see these figures that are like, just blast through it anyways. You've got, typical one is, David Goggins. I like looking at Ross Edgley and his mindset, because he's not about brute forcing it at all. He's more about, he's got this idea of stoic sports science, where he relies very much on gratitude. So he's like, every time he gets given a bit of food, he's, really grateful. He's like, thank you so much. And you saw it throughout his Great British Swim. And he's just swum the Yukon River. I think it was like 50 odd hours straight. He did like 300 miles solid, never touching a boat. Just, this guy is just next level machine.
He's a machine, yeah.
But he's always super positive. He's always, and it's not like blind positivity. He says it's gratitude, and that's a really interesting thing. So I've never done any sort of ultra endurance bits. I'm still kind of, well, maybe I should do one of those at some point, just tick it off. But I'm doing some training with a coach at the moment, and we're looking at, how I can build a bit more connection between what I'm doing and the stories I'm telling myself as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing, it's only week 2, but I'm looking forward to seeing how I get on with that and what sort of comes out the other side.
That's brilliant, Reese. I'd love to, know what you notice and how quickly it takes for you to notice anything different by trying to have a different mindset or trying to adopt a mindset that can hopefully help on the physical side of things.
Yeah, massively. I mean, I've been training on my own for quite some time now, and the most enjoyable time when I trained was with other people. Yeah. That was when I was at my fittest. That's when I was enjoying it most. But circumstances have meant I do spend a lot of time training on my own. So it is just a case of having a bit more accountability now and seeing, actually, I even noticed it at this session I did the other day. There was I had about 4 or 5 rounds of these exercises to do, and I kind of got there and I was like, shit, I've got a lot to do and I don't really feel like doing it. But then a couple of rounds later, it's like, actually, this feels all right now. So there's always a barrier, and then you kind of, if you just kind of get over that little barrier, then it's normally eases off a bit, and it is very much psychological. But yeah, very interesting.
Would you break that down? So, once you get over halfway, it's like, right, great, I'm over halfway now. And then I know on the run home from me, I've got commons and parks I live in South West London. There's commons and parks I can go and do a lot of my training in. But when I start to come home, the last 3 kilometers, I break down. I think there are 7 or 8 different sections that I break it down in my head, and they're not the same distance. It's just, that's to the end of the park, and then that's to the corner where the mini roundabout is. I break it down, and I can just count them off. I find that really helps me, just when just to help me kind of track progress and make me feel like, oh, great. Yeah, I've only got 3 left to do now.
It depends. Sometimes I think it's better not knowing. I'd rather not know. Okay. I only have if you're doing rounds of something, you round 4 of 10 and you're dying, and you're like, shit, I'd rather have just not known that at all. It depends what it is, but yeah, I don't know. It's always I think it's a very unique experience for everyone who's doing it.
It is. Well, in which case, if you do start to go towards endurance stuff, whether that's on the bike or swimming or running. I'd be really interested to know if you would adopt a sports watch or not to constantly beep at you and say, "Oh, that's another kilometre done," or "Oh, that's another 100 metres done in the pool," whatever it might be. Because if you don't want to know, the watch doesn't help with that.
Yeah, I've had a Ironman athlete on, and she said she only checks hers like once a kilometre. And the guy I'm having coaching with, Andrew Day, he's used to be sort of professional rugby player, and he's coach now. He's doing as many kilometres as he can, I think, in November. I'm not sure what he got up to in the end, but yeah, he said
What, running?
Yeah, but he said it's better to. He says, I feel like with a lot of these data-driven elements of sport watches, you kind of lose that connection, that human connection. So it's like, how am I feeling in the morning? Am I relying on my Whoop band to tell me I'm green, or am I actually feeling green?
Yep.
So it's very interesting, the different perceptions on how they use technology. But yeah, we can have another chat about that, I think.
Yeah. I was one quick thing on the kind of body and mind. I enjoy playing golf, and I read a sports psychology book or a golf psychology book, and it's called "Golf Is Not a Game of Perfect" by a golf coach called Bob Rotella. And I now adopt a different approach to golf, because I was getting quite frustrated with it. I have a pre-shot routine now that I go through, and part of that is reminding myself how much I love playing golf and how lucky I am to be out there right now playing golf with my mates. Isn't this brilliant? That's part of my pre-shot routine for every shot I take. It's just a little reminder of, this is brilliant. No matter what just happened, I might be really effed off about just slanking it into the bushes. But when I'm in the bushes trying to get out, this is brilliant. I love this. And that really, really helps. It just relaxes and your body reacts to it, I find.
Yeah, I always say I'm just getting my money's worth out of the course when I end up in the cabbage.
There you go.
You mentioned before about how you did your 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents with your friends. So I just wanted to, we had a pre-chat before this where we were talking about, the importance of friendships. So I wanted to stay on that topic, and it's a topic I think has been discussed quite recently. Maybe over the past year, it's become become more prevalent in podcasts and social media as to why friendships are important. And there's some stats I read earlier that were saying, 27% of men have fewer than 6 close friends, and 15% have no friends at all. One thing you said to me was how you've come to really appreciate the friendships as you've sort of gotten older. Talk me through that. Why has that been important to you?
I think those stats are specific to men. And I can see how that happens. I think so I haven't suffered from that. I feel very, very lucky, very, very blessed that I have a really strong network of supportive friends around me. But I've become conscious of this now as I'm, well into my middle age, and I've started to reflect on how I've managed to maintain that network, where, as we hear through those stats, many men don't manage to maintain that. I think part of it is I've started a family quite late on in life, and so I've had time up to this point to dedicate to my friends, which I love doing, and I feel that's been really, really important. That said, a lot of my friends within that net group, who all I feel would say the same thing, that we have a really supportive network of friendship. There have been some things over the last 10, 15 years that I think have helped that. And one of those was this club that we had running for 10 years, where every Tuesday evening after work, we'd meet in a local park and do a fitness session for 1 hour, and then we'd go home. We wouldn't go to the pub afterwards. You can go for pub afterwards if you want, but there's no expectation around that. You turn up, you exercise with each other, and then you go home. And it was just us, and we'd take it in turns to run a session every week. In fact, you got fined a $5 if you didn't turn up, because the commitment was that, no, we're going to be here. We're going to be here and see each other as life gets busier. And having that scheduled in every Tuesday, there was no excuse. You fit other things around it. Occasionally you couldn't turn up, and that was fine. Any money that was brought together through people not being able to turn up. We went into a pot, and then we'd spend that on a meal and some beers at a social at the end of every quarter. I feel that having something scheduled in really helped maintain those friendships throughout that period. And that was 10 years or more. Then the pandemic hit. And even then we started up another little club online where 3 times a week at 6 a.m. we'd go and do 20 minutes outside in the garden doing a fitness session together. And you're not having deeper, meaningful conversations with each other during any of this. But you're seeing each other, you're staying connected, and you're staying connected. You know what's going on in each other's lives. And if you need a deep and meaningful at that point, it was very easy to do because you'd seen the guys last week. Now I do that through, one of the mechanisms I have to do that is through a podcast I do with 2 of the chaps who actually I was at uni with, both engineers, and who were part of this club on Tuesday evenings as well. We don't have that club anymore, but I still get to see my mates, Tommy and Jono, every week, because we spend an hour and a half talking about something that we're all really, really interested in, and it's scheduled in. So I do feel, when I look back and reflect, I feel very blessed, very, very lucky. And I feel there's been some mechanisms that have been put in place, and not necessarily by me, but some mechanisms that have really helped maintain a friendship. And I know now, again, in a period of reflection, how much I've got out of those friendships, how I feel supported in anything I do. Like when I changed career, so much support from my mates to do that. When I got married and had a kid recently, so much support that have come through, and it makes such a difference to how I feel, because I know that if you start to become isolated and start to feel quite lonely, the world can be a much more difficult place.
Yeah, massively. And I think it's nice, that idea of having something scheduled in, because we're all very busy people, aren't we? And before you know it, you've kind of been like, oh yeah, we'll meet up, and then another year's gone past and you've not got in touch with that person. So it's no one's to blame. It's just more of a case of you need to just find something that works for all of you to be able to do that. I listened to Robert Greene the other day on a podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with some of his stuff.
I'm not new.
So he's an author, and he does a lot on. Yeah, he's got a book called The 48 Laws of Power, and he's a lot to do with like power, strategy, and sort of influence as well. But he was talking about just being yourself, being uniquely yourself. And I think this is important for people who maybe are struggling to make friends or sustain friendships. He says all of the, he's talking about all the little quirks that you have, down to the, the things you do before you eat dinner, or the music tastes you like, the hobbies you have, the way you dress. All these little quirks that you have make you very unique, and they make you you. So try not to dilute that, and try and stay authentic to what you're trying to do. And, I'm quite into like menswear, and I'll go to work and I'll wear a tie sometimes. And people are like, well, I've not see a tie in ages. Like, why do you wear a tie? And I do it because I like doing it, and I like how it makes me feel. And I've actually I made a lot of friends through doing that through the menswear space. It's the same with the watches as well. I've got, watch groups I go to. I've got friends in the industry now, and it's all little things that I've kind of geeked out over that have actually led me to develop some of my most powerful friendships. And so I'd say for people who may be struggling with building friendships, the best thing I did was at uni, I found sports groups, I found clubs that were, that had a common interest with people in, and the same with your hobbies. So if you like, board games, there's plenty of people that like board games. There's societies now, there's clubs that are set up. If you like coffee, going down to the local cafe, there's, people really geek out over this stuff now. So if you find you enjoy certain things, have a look around your area and look at if there's a club you can get involved in, because there's no reason. You're not like going into a room blind and you don't know what to talk to people about. You're going in with a mutual interest with people already there. They're there for the same reason you are, because they love coffee or because they love watches or something. So that would always be something I would recommend doing if you have a hobby, is go and have a look and see if you find clubs surrounding it. Is there anything you would suggest as to how people might sort of build friendships and help that?
It's a sense of belonging, isn't it? It's a sense of not feeling isolated, a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of something, a sense of community, right? You are part of that community, whether that's physical or virtual. I mean, we're talking right at the top, Reece, we're talking about our love of things, mechanical. But something to embrace within the digital age is access to the world, right? And you can get that mechanically. That's planes and stuff, but it's a lot more difficult than finding someone who's also into coffee or who's also into something that you really, really love geeking out. You can find your tribe so much more easily through social media, which I think is an absolutely fantastic side of it. So yes, I would echo what you've said there, to go and find your tribe, whoever that is, and start enjoy geeking out about whatever it is. That I don't feel it's slightly more difficult if you are isolated within that, your physical, in real life, in your physical space, and there's nobody else who's into what you're into. And I'm thinking particularly like around school kids, perhaps, who are. We did an episode on this the other day. Everyone's a geek about something. Did an episode on the podcast about that the other day, so I can speak quite fluently about this. At school, if in that space nobody else is into the music that you're into and that you're seen as a bit of an outsider, I understand how that could be quite difficult during that time at school. But hopefully there is a sense of connection, a sense of belonging to be found virtually in the world, because there is so much going on within each of these geeky topics, and everyone's a geek about something with each of these geeky topics, to go and geek out with those who enjoy doing what you enjoy doing. That's that sense of belonging. That's that sense of connection that I feel we all need. You just sometimes need to find ways to do it, but I feel that it is possible. And I would echo what you said there about considering your interests, considering what you enjoy, what you love, what drives you. What are you a geek about? Go and find your fellow geeks, because there will be a almost guaranteed connection to be found there.
Rob Bell, everyone. Thank you very much, Rob. That is, really enjoyed the conversation. I think there's some, it's nice to have someone I can geek out to as well. I think we've got some quite common interests there, and some really interesting topics we've discussed. So thank you once again for your time. If people want to find out a little bit more about what you do, maybe have a look at the podcast you're doing as well, where is the best place to find that information?
So podcast is called Sketchplanations, the podcast. It's a project my mate Jono set up 10 years ago, where he does a sketch every week that explains something in the world around us. It's about curiosity. It's about an enjoyment of that curiosity with friends. So search for Sketchplanations, the podcast, and we're on all podcast players. Alternatively, I'm on Instagram, on my website, robbell.tv.
Brilliant. That Sketchplanations is awesome. I do a regular deep dive, and I find myself going down the rabbit hole of like 15, 16 different ones. I'm like, I need to go do some work now.
Nice one, Rich. Jono recently celebrated his 900th sketch on Sketchplanations. Oh, wow. So there's plenty of material for the podcast has only been going for a year, so there's plenty of material for us to get diving into.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rob. Much appreciated.
Nice one, Rich. Thanks for having me on, mate.
Cheers.